pouring out by me. That's how I forgot my computer.
Jeez. I'm afraid it's the fact that it's gonna get cold when the temperature's gonna change.
Oh, let me show you this too. I meant to share this. At least that was my understanding. So just. How's your mommy doing?
You know, she is really doing so much better.
Oh, is she good?
Feisty as ever.
Well, you want that with a lady her age.
Yeah, you're so right. How old is your mom? My mom is 96 years old.
Wow.
And she still rules.
Oh, yeah. If my mom were still living, she'd be 91 Sunday.
Oh.
Oh, how old was she when she passed?
85.
Oh, that's good
Yeah.
too.
She's been gone 5 years.
Yeah.
And I still miss her.
Every day, every minute of every day.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
It is.
It
It's horrible.
She died. She died right when the campaign's first term.
So she never just knew to go away.
The thing in the news lines will look at. And when we left, no, look, it was the brightest shooting star I've ever seen. That's mom. That's mom.
Do you really like, see, we're just talking about, do you still feel that 5 years
Oh, yeah. How long has it been since your mom's been gone?
Yeah. You know, it's not, it's easy. You know, we were like,
See, my best friend's mom just passed away in her memorial services 2 weeks ago. I had to prove her obituary before she submitted it. I was like, look, I wish I could tell you it's easy. You just learn how to prove better.
just others things, just times when see my daughter, oh, I'd be so proud of Sarah.
She ran.
See, Sarah, she was so close to Sarah Catherine too. She was just, they were like, I just miss even all this time. I still miss her. I think I'm never gonna stop.
Mom loved my son to death. Those are all my grandson. And the coolest thing was for her 80th birthday. Her adoption was on. We celebrated her 80th birthday on Sunday. We found out on Friday that the adoption was going on. So for her 80th birthday, I read the decrees to her.
Was it expected? My mom said.
Yeah, well, it was expected, but we thought it would have. She'd always bounce back. She worked till she was 80. She fell and broke her ankle and couldn't work it. She's a hairdresser.
I'm sorry. How can I help you?
I always get confused. I think it's, I just say HYA.
I don't want to say.
Etta, I think. Etta. I always get confused. He says it, and I get confused.
Yeah, I want to actually pronounce it out and stuff.
Yeah, like maybe.
Does that help? Etta. Etta.
Okay. Because I'm gonna kick it off. Lauren's gonna come in.
Is he okay?
Yeah, take his mom to Dr. He just thinks he's gonna be delayed. So, it's okay. It's all good.
Are we gonna do anything for him when he has his operation?
I know I'm covering November's meeting.
I mean, he's been, you know, I told him because my husband had this, I mean, he's gonna be weeks.
Oh,
And, you know, I just thought maybe we could get dinner for them or
the thing is, we didn't do anything
And it's a lot of exercise and stuff. I said, "Did you do the exercises?" It's really good.
I went to it with Mom.
Actually, it's way better than the knee.
Is it?
Oh, that's why I hear the knee is supposed to be worse.
What's it with Mom? Ball in a socket. Her socket had worn out so bad they had to take bone and graft in behind the socket to be able to put it in the
Even
fake
put
one.
it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin's was, they actually said his was congenital, and it's kind of disease they know about now. They said if we had known this, if we had looked at it when we were 40, we could have fixed it. But he said, he was 65 at the time. He said, we can't fix it now, it's too late. But before 40, we can fix it. Oh, let me talk to Mr.
What happened with Margaret is when a cow kicked him last year, earlier, they fractured. And the doctors thought, well, the orthopedics didn't detect it. So there's a fracture at the ball right here, there's a fracture right here at the top. They didn't work on that fracture, so the top part of this, the ball, is decayed away because it's not getting blood flow from a fracture.
Ah, wow. Well, Dr. Francis was just right there.
He just stepped out to take a phone call.
Oh, okay. I was gonna come over and say, he was just there. I know, I saw him.
He's gonna be delayed. Kicking the ball for me in school. She had it.
What have you been up to, Mr. John?
Tell me what you just.
Here he is. What have you been up to? Anything interesting?
I'm sorry, what?
So what have you been up to? Anything interesting?
No, I haven't. Been at home.
Hello, Mr. Martin.
Hey, Martin. Ma'am?
I'm sure this weather doesn't help me this evening.
Are you gonna be happy not to be hobbling around anymore?
Yes,
I know.
I'd say that with absolute certainty.
When's your surgery?
10th of November.
So you guys are stuck with me the 12th of November. Take it easy on me.
Don't forget my credit card. Please.
Georgia, how are you?
I'm great, doing great.
Did you all go back to the beach? I never, I very, very, very rarely respond on Facebook, but I thought I saw you at the beach. Dr. Francis. Hello, Mr. Johnson.
How are you, Jason?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Yeah. wife's still in therapy over Josh being a Hokie.
Probably will be for a long time.
Don't worry, one day she will embrace it.
Hope so.
We'll get her one of those Cookie Mom stickers, that makes everything better.
I think she's probably got about 3 dozen of those that people have pushed upon her.
You'll notice a strange phenomenon. Your son's closet will suddenly become more and more orange and maroon, and you don't really know how it happens, it just happens.
Those are beautiful colors.
You don't usually think of them as being beautiful together, but they get there.
I'm a Hokie graduate, so
They go right behind the orange and blue.
absolutely Hokie through.
My wife went to UVA for
Did
2
you know
years.
that?
Oh, yeah, I did my, I'm undergrad and also my grad.
Take the kids.
Great.
Yeah,
No wonder we've always gotten along.
absolutely.
Before we move, please, I have a question for you about Central Virginia Gun School. Okay.
Started to call you the other night during the last superintendent search.
Sorry, what?
Were you during the last superintendent search?
No.
For some reason I thought you were.
Thanks.
Thank you. How are you, Jason?
I'm okay. How are you?
I can't complain. Wet.
What you mean?
Were you up in Blacksburg today?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Oh, that's good. You don't have to travel up that road.
Yes. It is not the would be out about.
I like sticking at home when it's raining.
Yeah. I get to go down to Williamsburg by myself for the weekend. Even Friday after work, and he's already instructed kids not to call me. You could have one.
Call this 29 September 2020 work session of Bedford County School Board to order. Ms. Johnson, please call the roll.
Mr. Leamy?
Here.
Mrs. Kirby?
Here.
Mrs. Hairston?
Here.
Dr. Hicks?
Here.
Mr. Hill? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Dr. Mealy?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Mr. Drager, since, can you hear me all right?
I can.
Okay. Since this is all, everyone in this room here has not been through this process. We were not on the board when the last superintendent was selected. I'm going to hand it off to you so you can walk us through this process and then cover the things that you need from us when you need them from us so that we can make this happen.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your confidence in having Young and Tia, and we're very, very excited to get this started. We have, of course, a pandemic challenge amongst all of us, and I think we can successfully navigate that too. So you are searching for a superintendent. It's probably the most important thing that a board does. But before I go any further, let me introduce the other person in the big head screen here. And I'll introduce myself. But Ann, go ahead. This is my colleague Ann Monday. We've worked on a number of searches together. Ann, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ann Monday, and I have been working with HYA and as a partner to Brad for approximately 6 years. I am sitting in Northern Virginia as Brad is, having spent 40 years in public schools, first as a teacher, then a school-based administrator, 12 years as a middle and high school principal, and an assistant superintendent, and finally the superintendent of Fairfax City Schools. So I have a deep and long history as an educator, and I want you to know that that's where my heart remains, and that's how I approach this work, with deep respect for educators and the work that they do. One of the things I like best about the work with HYA is going into a community and getting to know it and getting to know the culture there and really feeling it. Well, we can't do that now, but I will say to you, and I hope at the end of this session you are convinced that we will do everything we can to get to know you, to listen to perspectives, and to make this search really personalized for you so that we can bring you the best possible candidates. That's our goal.
Thanks, Ann. Mr. Levy, can you hear both of us?
Yes, sir.
Well enough?
Yes.
Excellent. So I am Brad Drager. For the board members who weren't in on the original proposal, or Susan Mealy knows me a little bit, I started out life as a high school band director in Fairfax County, actually before that in Pinellas County, Florida. But I have done every job, including interim superintendent in Fairfax County Public Schools for 22 years, and then retired from Virginia and was superintendent up in Livingston, New Jersey for 7.5 years, right outside New York City. So I went from 180,000 students to 6,600 students. So I've done the very large and I've done the very small. Been working with HYA since my retirement in New Jersey in 2013. Probably have done about 60 or 70 searches up and down the East Coast, a lot in Virginia, a lot in Maryland, and as far south as Atlanta. Just recently filled that position, and as far north as Fairfield, Connecticut. So let me take you through the search process. There are many search firms. We all kind of follow the same basic premise, but we feel that sometimes the quality of ours is different because of who Ann is and who Brad is. So you can let us know at the end of this how we did. Mr. Lee, does everybody have the agenda?
Yes, everyone has been emailed the agenda.
Excellent, thank you. So we will be going through that in just a second. But let me give you a broad overview, and then we'll go into the details of the agenda. The most important thing to do, as Ann said, is figure out what does Bedford need as a superintendent. So we need to assess where you currently are, where you want to go, and what type of person fits best. And actually, we're going to ask you individually and others in the community 3 basic questions, which is, what's good about Bedford? Why do people want to come to Bedford? What would make a superintendent and his family or her family attracted to Bedford, and what would make them stay? And what are the programs you are very proud of and you want to retain and grow? That's the first question. The second question we ask the community and you is, what are the challenges and issues you face over the next 3 to 5 years? Very important. That's this new superintendent's time frame. And trust me when I say when we collect this information, your candidates and applicants will want to read that in great detail, because that'll give them some idea of the issues you're facing. And then finally, what type of superintendent, what skills, what personality, what leadership characteristics, what qualifications, background, what would make the best superintendent in Bedford County? Some people will say Patton, and some people will say Gandhi, and there's probably something in the middle there. We'll try and figure out the best match for Bedford County Public Schools, because there's an axiom in superintendent searching. If your superintendent behave this way, sometimes when they leave, you want to get superintendent that behaves this way. We always recommend meet somewhere in the middle about that. Don't make a 180-degree change. So I know you've had a successful run with your current superintendent, apparently on board till June 31st, June 30th, I should say. Calendar challenge, music major, you kid. And then the issue is, I know when talking to Susan Mealy and some others, there's been an initial thing about, can we move this up? Of course we can move it up. You could probably get an announcement in May. You might get an announcement in late April. but we like to take time to develop this. So once we answer those 3 questions, and this will take us about 2 weeks of virtual meetings, and I was talking to Barry, and Barry has been very helpful so far, and we already have kind of a plan I'll go through in a little bit. But once we talk to your community, then we're going to come back to you in an open board meeting and present our findings. We'll have a complete report about how this all played out, what did we find out, and we're also going to simultaneously be doing an online survey that asks your community and you and everybody else, what are the qualities in those same 3 questions, and what is leadership, and what's important in Bedford. And because we are virtual, we're adding, I called Chicago today, and we're going to add in the 3 open-ended questions. So what's good about Bedford? What can we do? And people can just respond open-endedly, and you'll get to read all those. It actually usually turns out for the district, the division, to be one of the largest community surveys done with a lot of feedback, because people usually feel passionate about who they want for their next leader. So we'll present that to you probably about 2 weeks after we finish all the virtual stuff. And then we begin heavy recruitment, and Ann and I, through the colleagues of the Hazard, Young, and Atia, of course, we'll place ads and we'll do advertising, and that gets everybody's interest generated. But the real thing that creates interest is us recruiting. And one of the questions we informally ask in all these virtual meetings is, please send us an email to anybody you think we should be pursuing. And sometimes, in fact, Ann and I will probably say in almost 30-40% of our cases, some of our best referrals end up being the superintendents or the people ultimately get chosen. Sometimes it's an insider, many times it's an outsider, sometimes it's a person in Washington State, sometimes it's in California. We've had all types of referrals of outside candidates. So once we do the recruitment, and Ann and I are screening the applicants, we're screening them against what we heard and what you say you need, then we start to make tiers of who are the top applicants, who's the middle ground, qualified but not quite the top applicants, and finally we let you see everybody who applied, because always, I've never had it not happen, a bus driver, a custodian, or a substitute teacher will apply for the Bedford County Public Schools. It happens every time. And sometimes people brag about, we had 75 applicants, and I always say, well, how many will actually need state certification? That's an important issue. So we will let you see that all. We're actually going to set up a portal for each board member. You'll have your logon and a password. And for instance, this should be available in about 48 hours. You'll be able to see the notes from this meeting on there with all the dates that we set during this meeting. And then the most important thing comes, we recommend who we've been talking to you. So you're going to see the highly recommend. We're going to show you the next tier. And you get to say how many you want to interview and who you want to interview and how we want to do that. And then we'll work with you on how to conduct those interviews. That's an important part of this evening too, setting the dates for those interviews when all 7 board members can commit a rather large block of time to this interviewing process. And we will work through and with you during that entire interview process to make sure you're supportive. We're working with the candidates, and we let you narrow it down. We help you with the deliberation. We don't guide you. We just are the neutral voice in the room to help you make the decision in terms of who you want to pursue. And if everything works out, we do a first round of interviews, probably about 6 or 7 candidates, narrow it down, vote some people off the island who you want to see more of. And then people come back for a second round of interviews, and frequently somebody who didn't do really well in this first interview does extremely well in the second interview. And sometimes somebody who did extremely well in the first interview doesn't do as well in the second interview. So I always ask you to hold judgment. And then the final night, we're usually deciding about 3 people who's going to be your next superintendent. Sometimes we walk out of the room in 20 minutes because everybody's in violent agreement. And I've spent as long as 3 or 4 hours deciding who we're going to pursue. And then we do a background check on that person, extensive background check, credit check, driving records, court history, liens, bankruptcies, credit report. I think I said that. You will see that their degrees are verified, their work experience is verified, and that makes you feel comfortable going into the contract negotiations and finally appointing your superintendent. So, and that's it in a nutshell. Did I leave anything out?
I think you got it.
Okay. Any general questions from the board yet before I dive into the agenda? Okay, let's go. So, number 1 was a quick review of each step of the prototypical search. I'm actually going to come back to this because we're going to set dates, and I want you to go through some of the other parts first because I think it'll help us understand where to set the dates. So, if you turn to my second page, number 3, these are the people we'd like to meet with. So, for instance, Ann or I will meet individually with board members and ask those same 3 questions. We usually need 30 minutes. Diane Johnson probably can tell us if we need 45 with certain board members. You know how that goes. Some people don't know. I can't tell if you're chuckling, so I hope you are, or if you're smiling. It's hard, you know? Between the TV and the mask, this is a challenge. Superintendent individually, if the board wants that to happen, usually they do. Superintendent's cabinet, sometimes the board tells us to meet with them individually, sometimes they tell us to meet with them collectively. That all is your call. Central office administrators, in other words, there's other people in your central office that we should meet with. That can probably be a group. Elementary principals are important. Secondary principals, assistant principals. We like to meet with middle and high school students. They are very, very open about what's going on, and we learn a lot about the district through talking to students. Employee association leadership, I have the word labor there, it's by New York State, I know. Employee association leadership, teachers, open meetings after school or even in the evenings, and they're frequently also parents. So sometimes they come in dual roles. They show up at the parent meeting and at the teacher meeting. You probably have district PTA division wide representation. We'd like to meet with those people. Special education, and if you have any other gifted and talented or low-tech parents, usually districts have a lot of different special committees of parents that they meet with. You may want us to meet with county administrators. That's a board call. Elected officials, if that's another thing that you want us to talk to. And then we'll have some open meetings for parents and any citizens and any other groups or individuals identified by the board. When talking to Barry and setting up this meeting just about 2 hours ago, we discussed, because you have 3 high schools and 3 catchment basins for students, it probably would make sense for this type of meeting with an open mic and a broadcast video with Ann and I on like this, to ask those 3 questions for people who want to show up in the school because of broadband issues or other logistics, and actually participate in a room such as you are today, and Ann and I will take notes on those 3 questions and write that all down. But then we'd also like to set up, for parents who want this or other people, a Zoom or whatever vehicle we use. Ann and I just recently conducted a focus group, just like we were talking about, with 257 people on it. And believe it or not, it worked really well. It really did. We were able to keep the people in sequence, and people were very respectful of each other. And we didn't have any Zoom bombing or anything like that, so it worked really, really well, and we would look forward to that. So can I let me with the board, go down this list one more time. I think board members is a given. Does the board want us to talk with the current superintendent?
I don't have a problem.
Yeah, I think it's,
Okay.
definitely.
Thanks,
Okay, I hear a yes.
Yep.
Superintendent's cabinet, people who report directly to the superintendent. These are pretty invaluable people to talk to because they are doing the work. You
Yeah,
talk to them individually or collectively?
Individually.
yeah, individually.
Got it. And as I said, you'll see notes that we're keeping to make sure we're getting this right. Central office administrators, I propose another group virtual meeting for central office administrators. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Elementary principals, some districts want everybody in the room. Some people say break it out. We don't care. Sometimes there are issues at the elementary level that are not at the secondary level. What's your deference?
Break it out.
Yeah, break it up. Break it
Okay,
up.
and are you okay with assistant principals in the meeting?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And, excuse me, but do your elementary schools have any assistant principals?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we'll make sure they're invited too. Students will work with Diane and some others so that we get nice representation for students, maybe one at each of the 3 high schools and maybe middle schools. We'll figure that out with Diane, but you're okay with us talking with middle and high school students?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Brad, I think what you're gonna find is we have the more the merrier attitude as far as stakeholder input.
We agree. I mean, we find that in a lot of districts, and I don't think Bedford has intense interest, so that's fine. That's not a problem. Employee association leadership. How many employee associations do you have?
One,
Just one, and they represent support employees and everything.
BCEA.
the BCEA, yes.
Okay.
If you
So we'll set
remember,
up with a meeting, and what we'll do is set up a meeting. If they decide it's just their leadership, that's fine, or if they want other members to join, we can do that too. We'll work again with Diane on that. Is Diane in the room?
Yes, she is. She just isn't visible, but she is here.
Okay, hi Diane, we're gonna get to know each other real well.
Excuse me.
Then teachers, I think we'll do the same thing with teachers. If we were to have a meeting in each of your 3 geographic areas and have teachers either come
It's
or
not as
Zoom
big.
to that would work,
Here's the
right?
second one.
Okay, yeah. Say, I'm sorry, we had a little sidebar going.
With teachers, we'd like to probably, because of the size, geographic size and, getting around, we'd probably like to have 3 geographic meetings for teachers and they could either come or Zoom into that meeting. Is that all right?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay. How about parent groups? PTA, yes?
Yes, but
Yes, do you have other groups?
could we also ask for the PTA the PTA, not just the PTA county council, but invite, I don't know if they'll come, PTA members, board members from each school would also be welcome to that.
Excellent. PTA board members. Okay, do you have a special education parent group?
Yes.
Yes.
We should talk to them.
Yes.
yes, definitely.
And do you have other groups of parents like that?
No.
We have a vocational group, don't we, or, from Susie Gibson? We don't,
Well,
Who's that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
you know, okay,
No, disregard.
CT Advisory Board, yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Which is business and community.
Oh, GT advisory, okay. How about county administrators or elected officials?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
And which ones are those, county administrators or elected officials? Or both?
They're the same.
Well, I would go with the elected officials mostly than
Yes.
the county
I
administrators.
agree.
Okay, how many administrators do you have, just curious?
We've got seven county administrators, and then we have 7 town council members.
I think it would be important for him to meet with the county administrator too.
Yeah, he's gonna be a working
That's-
relationship.
Well, yeah, that's fine, yeah, we can talk.
That's what I meant by, county administrator, right?
Yes.
Okay, got that? Do you have clergy groups or anything like that? Do you have an ecumenical council or,
No.
is that a yes or no? I'm
No.
sorry.
No, it's a no.
Okay, how about, we're gonna have those open parents for, parents and any citizens. And then, who have we forgotten? Who do you want us to talk to, that participatory thing? Who's missing off this list? Who will feel left out if we don't invite them to something?
Well, I personally can't think of anybody else.
I can't
Do we
think.
have any representation for the EL community? And do you think that's necessary? We're getting a larger and larger EL community. Is that important or just, I guess what I'm saying too is Hispanic-speaking parents, for example. I mean, that's getting to be a larger.
I don't know.
That's included in all theirs.
I don't know if there's a specific organization dedicated to
Single anybody out.
Can I speak to that for just a minute?
Sure.
Hello?
Go ahead, Ann.
Yes,
Yes, I do think that sensitivity toward EL parents is probably important, but also they can be included with other parents. Do you have the capacity to translate invitations into Spanish? So in other words, if there's a Spanish-speaking parent, would they know about this? Do you have that capacity?
We can get that till.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, and then if we had certain meetings, you might want to have at least one person there that can translate if necessary, if any Hispanic parents come. So we can think about that and communicate with you if that becomes an issue.
Okay.
Yes.
If you think of anybody else,
Or custodians, bus
Hold on a
drivers,
oh yeah,
nutrition
support
workers.
employees, thank you.
Yes.
Are the bus drivers paid by you or do you contract it out?
Paid.
Paid.
We're paid, we pay them.
Okay, you have food service workers too?
Yes.
And you have, of course, clerical staff and support staff in the central office. So, yeah, we should have a meeting for support staff,
Agreed.
okay?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Good call, thank you. All right, and again, if you think of anybody, once you get this list back that we've missed, just let us know and we'll set up that meeting. I can't see Diane, but can you all look at Diane? Diane, do you have, what I'm gonna do to you, Diane, is send you like boilerplate invitations that we would email out to these people, and I'll work with you on the logistics. But Diane, do you have contacts for a lot of the groups we've just named? I would assume you have emails and stuff like that.
I
She's
do.
shaking her head yes or no?
Yes, I do.
Yes, she is. She is. She's shaking
that's
her head
good.
yes.
Well, that's good. Okay. All right. So let's move on to number 4. And again, you can come back if you think of somebody.
Brad, can I add something as well?
Yep.
School board members, one of the things that we encourage you to do is, if you have your own website, put out this information. Once these dates are established and locations, if you have your own website, yes, your clerk will be sending invitations out. Some of them will be broadcast in different ways. Brad and I will work with her on that. But you can encourage people in any way that you wish. If you know that there are people who have some concerns and want to give input, absolutely share this information. This is not closed. There should be an opportunity for every member of your community that wants to give input to participate in some way. And we'll also be doing the online survey, and that is again open to all groups, and that's next on our agenda. So again, the more proactive that you are, the better participation we're likely to get.
Yeah, and that leads me right into this, which is people who are uncomfortable with electronics and or social not being present in an actual meeting. The online survey is the perfect way for them to go. And we're going to put that up online while we're doing the other thing. It'll be up for about 2 weeks, and we'll talk about the dates for that as we get back to that calendar section. But the next thing is we have a drop-down menu. When you go on to take this survey, and we're going to put this survey on your website and on our website, when you hit, take the survey, it's going to ask you to identify who you are. And unfortunately, we can only do 6 different categories. So you're going to see 6 different reportable areas. Now, these are just suggestions. Some people don't like these, so what we're saying is here's what a lot of people do, but you can change these around. If you don't want students on there, or if you want support staff linked in with teachers or teachers in with administrators, some people think that it should be business people should have their own, but then you have to give up one of the 6 that are there, because there's only 6 possible. So these are just suggestions. Why don't the board just have a brief discussion? Are these 6 okay with you, or is there a group that you'd rather specifically see when you see the results? Because let's pretend with almost 10,000 students, you might get 1,000 to 1,500 surveys back, and out of that you might get, maybe 100 administrators. You'll probably get almost 200 teachers. You'll get some support staff. Students is a small category usually in terms of returns, but many board members want to make sure they're there. Parents is usually a very large one. And then community members, we put non-parents in parentheses because some, and many people wear multiple hats, so that's always difficult. So are you okay with these 6, or are there discussions amongst the board for what 6 we should go with?
I think these pretty much
these look
cover
good.
it all.
Yeah.
Yes, the 6 are good as presented.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so 5 we're going to go back to, but as we said, these will just be phone interviews.
Good point.
So
Hey Brad,
no
excuse
big
me.
deal.
Hey Brad, Jason Johnson has a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I was just curious about the difference between the parents and the community parentheses non-parents category. So if we have a child being raised perhaps by a grandparent or an aunt or uncle, would there be some clarification as to how they should categorize themselves when taking the survey?
I had this come up in 2 other divisions, and what we'll do is next to parents, we'll say legal guardian. Is that okay? And that covers that, and that's a good point.
Ms.
I'll
Kirby?
make sure we're not treated like that.
Back on number 3 with the identification of individuals for, to meet with.
Yes.
I'm sorry, sometimes I'm a slow thinker. Could we also include athletic directors with this, and our athletic boosters and extracurricular boosters from the different high schools?
Do you have other booster groups like band boosters and stuff?
Yes, we do. And I know we have, we have Minuteman Club, Cavalier Club.
All right,
Stanton.
so we'll have an extracurricular meeting. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
That's good, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to number 6. Speaking to Mr. Leamy, and then recently I've been talking with Susan Mealy. I don't care. We normally have one designee that we deal with, but I'll tell you, almost the information blankets out to all 7 of you all the time. It'd be rare, it might be, I need to move the agenda from 5:15 to 5:30, or I'm sending you 6 pages tonight and I sent you 5 yesterday. I mean, whatever I'm talking to this board liaison about, it's gonna be small stuff, and the rest of the board will have all the entire information. But who should we see as our main point of contact for board liaison?
For right now, Brad, just have Dr. Mealy be the primary and I'll be the secondary. She's very good about contacting me.
Excellent, okay. And then you see on number 7, our contact information. Feel free, if you can tell, Ann had a wonderful makeup job today. She probably looks like she's in her 30s. But we're both retired, and so we're available. That's what I'm saying. So you don't have to feel bad about calling us in the evening. You don't have to feel bad about calling us in the morning. You don't have to feel bad calling us on a weekend. We live for your phone calls, so that's okay. Number 8, the number of candidates. I have boards sometimes say, oh, 5, 6, 7, that's not enough. We want to interview 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have never had a board interview a lot of candidates, and I'm going to say over 7, who's happy about that decision at the end. They all look at us and say, we should have listened to you. I'm going to recommend, we're going to give you a natural break. We might get 4 superstars, and I'll say that 5, 6, and 7 you can interview, but I don't think you're going to find them good as 1, 2, 3, 4. Or we might find 6 who are really strong, and we're going to say you probably should interview all 6. But are you okay with that type of approach? And remember, you'll still get to see the next tier and everybody else, including the substitute teacher or bus driver.
Everybody good with
Yes,
6?
yes, I think that's great.
6 is good. 6 is a good number.
All right, very excellent. You guys, you're like GT all the way here. Number 9, inside candidates. Some boards feel that they should handle the inside candidate. Our personal recommendation would be you probably want to put them through our process, and then Ann and I, as we screen your inside candidates, we can kind of tell you how they compare to your outside candidates, and there's still a decision point. Let's pretend that you do send them to the outside to us, and we screen them. When we're having that evening meeting, that very important slate presentation of the candidates, you get to decide, are we going to not interview this person because Brad and Ann said they didn't meet the qualifications or weren't as good as these other 4, or are we going to give them an interview? So what I'm saying is you'll still have a decision point even if you send them through our process, but some boards don't even want to send them through our process. They just want to say, if so-and-so applies, we're going to interview. That's your call.
I think we need to do the process,
Yeah, I think-
and that's what we're paying
I
for.
think all applicants need to go through
Yes.
you all.
Okay, so then you will see them, and again, no matter where they fall in terms of our screening, you'll see them, and you'll still have another decision that afternoon as to whether you want to bring them into an interview or not. And there's much to talk about that. If it's a courtesy interview, sometimes it's developmental for the person, but sometimes it kind of falls, but we'll talk about all that when we get to that bridge. If I could ask Diane, if you don't mind, it would be helpful to see your current superintendent's salary and contract, because the question we get asked most often is, what are they going to pay? And I know you don't want to pay exactly what you're paying or the fringe benefits of the contract, but it gives us some idea of, do you want to bracket around that current contract, or do you want to move it lower, move it higher? The other thing I probably need to do is look at the salaries around you, and you probably know those well. But we probably at some point need to arrange how Ann and I will answer that question from the candidates, which is, what are they paying? And it doesn't have to be, they're going to pay $155. It can be a range of, they're going to be in the mid 100s, they're going to be, they're going to be somewhere.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I just want to give this little piece of information to the board. I did speak with Mr. Hagler about this, just saying, can you help us with this? And his advice to us was that HYA should be able to develop a range for us based on exactly what Mr. Drager said, which is looking around at other communities, because of course our superintendent's been here for 10 years. So he just thought it would be a good idea if we considered allowing the
I think,
agency to do that.
I think what we need to do, I mean, they're experienced at doing this, let them do the analysis and come up with that range.
Right.
To give us a starting point to work with. Is everybody,
Yes.
That
is
was-
everybody cool with that?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so when we bring the leadership profile back to you, we will bring you what our findings were about the surrounding jurisdictions and what we think will be a workable number. And again, it's not set in concrete. If you find a superstar who happens to be coming out of a central office directorship or assistant superintendent, that's one salary range. And if you have a superstar who's in a rather suburban urban area and they're making a higher salary, yes, cost of living could be a differential, but there'll be different salaries depending upon the candidate you're pursuing. That's an important part of this too. So we will bring that back to you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you said something about us forwarding you the current contract, can we do that technically without breaching confidentiality of employment? Or can we just send you the details of the contract?
I think that's
You can send
public
me the details.
information.
I don't care.
Okay.
What I'm looking for is what fringe benefits are you paying? Is there a tax deferred renewal? Is there a county car? Is there tech? Is there association membership? So if you can send me that.
And Mr. Drager, I'd also add just one more thing. Since our superintendent has been here so long, and this is just something that the board can think about, over the years, he has received more and more benefits. So I was just wondering, can we get kind of a basic package and have some add-ons that might be necessary if someone's on the fence? If we find, candidate number 2, we really want this person, but something that we could offer an additional incentive if that were necessary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, that's why I'd like to see the contract, because as you say, when a superintendent has been there for a while, things grow, get added in, and some of them are not needed in this stage, where you might be missing something. And another thing that you have flexibility with is sometimes moving expenses. It's a one-time expenditure, and it's not something that's recurring and ongoing. So there's some flexibility, and yes, I'll give you my best thinking on that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Drager, if we set some kind of basic salary ranges, how much flexibility would we have to negotiate depending on experience levels within those?
Well, I always recommend when you go, and what will happen is once you arrive at a candidate, they will give you an expectation of what they're looking for in terms of compensation and benefits.
Okay.
And then that begins a starting point for negotiations. Sometimes it's the board liaison or board chair directly with the candidate. Sometimes it's attorney to attorney. And that's going to be up to how you approach that. But yes, there's a lot of leeway, and one of the most important things is what were they making? In other words, if they were making 115, jumping them to 175 doesn't make a lot of sense. If they're at 175, trying to bring them in at 130 doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, there's got to be some negotiation room in there.
Okay, so we would not be locked into those broad categories. Okay, great, thank you.
No.
Mr. Hill, I just wanted to add a comment, but in all of that we just said, we want to be competitive. So, when you do your analysis, whether the board likes it or not, we need to hear it. Because we want to be competitive for Bedford County.
Yeah, if it hasn't come across, I'm not shy about saying that.
Okay, perfect.
And Brad, in our advertising, or after your advertising and early conversations with candidates, we would say regionally competitive salary and benefits. And that's the basic expectation of folks. And it's up to us to come up with what that looks like. And that doesn't guarantee anything. It just says that it is going to be competitive with the region.
Okay, thank you. All right, the letter of understanding, Susan, Dr. Mealy and I worked all through that. It's all signed, sealed, and delivered, so we don't even have to pay any attention to that one. Communication with press and community. We don't like to give quotes to the press unless you tell us to give a quote to the press. We always like to refer back to the board because it is the board that's in control of the search and the ultimate people who will vote on who their superintendent is. So if we were to get a press inquiry, or if you as individual board members get a press inquiry, who do you want that to go to, and who do you want to be the spokesperson for this search?
I'll handle that.
Okay, thank you. Do you get a lot of, or do you think there will be a lot of interest in this?
Yes?
No
Yes, I
hesitation
do.
there. All right, 14, 15, and 16 we'll come back to because we're going to go through that during the calendar development. Well, you guys have flown through that. Let's go back and do the hard part now. If you'll turn back to number 2, are there any questions up to this point? Because that's the search in a nutshell without going into the details of the interviewing, which I'm about to get into. Okay, so the first thing on this grid on number 2 is the leadership profile interviews. And that's where we're going to go out and meet with all these people. We're going to send out invitations. And we're going to set up Zoom and virtual meetings across Bedford, all zooming back into Northern Virginia here for Ann and I. And we'll be calling board members individually, and we'd like to see you without a mask. And, so maybe we'll do a Zoom individually there or something like that, because that's always helpful. I was thinking, given the fact that there's some logistics with the virtual part of it, and I think you're off on, is it October 20th you have a closed, I think you're closed that day for teacher workshop, do I have the right date?
October 21st.
21st.
Oh, it's the 21st, it's Wednesday, okay. I was thinking maybe start that next week if we could. That gives us 3 weeks to get set up and get the invitations out. So I'm thinking the 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, and the 30th, somewhere in that week before Halloween, we'll try and get a lot of this done. And that's where I'll immediately start working with Diane tomorrow and Barry and figuring out how we're gonna get all these groups invited and set up the meetings. But that's my goal. And then what I'd like to do is we'll stand up the online survey on the 23rd of October, and we'll run it all the way probably to November 6th, because we may have some bleed over from our virtual meetings into the next week too. So I'm proposing that the online survey date be October 23rd through November 6th, and that we shoot for the virtual stuff October 26th through the 30th. Any objections or suggestions? Because it impacts, we're gonna have to move quick, but Ann, what do you think? Is that too soon?
No, I don't think so. If everybody gets on it immediately, yeah.
Okay.
Mr.
All
Hill?
right, so then,
Hey, Brad,
when is your,
Brad, Marcus Hill has a question for you.
Yeah, Brad, real quick, so with these meetings, I guess I need to understand why are they all virtual for you guys?
well, Ann and I, again, back to our age, we're not comfortable being in a non-pandemic situation, and we've been very, very successful with these meetings in other places. Now, could I find a colleague who might come in? I might be able to, but I was asking Chicago today, I said, do we have any searches that are not virtual? And they said, no, not at this time. So
So-
we're still kind of in that mode.
So with going with that, if you and Ann are not present during these meetings,
Well, we are present.
physically present,
Okay.
who is on site with the parents or community as they come into these meetings?
Yeah, I would ask that the board or somebody be designated. I mean, in some cases, for instance, we were talking about the 3 geographic areas. I know we're gonna have to have a tech person there, just because of the logistics to make sure the connections are going and everything like that. But if the board wants to designate somebody that could do that for us, just to facilitate the opening and closing, when Ann and I used to physically be present, we'd usually be dealing with a custodian. And as you know, the custodians, beyond the principal secretary assistant, they run the buildings anyway. So the custodians are very helpful. You maybe want a little higher presence for the parents, just as they're coming in. sometimes when we're in schools, a principal or an assistant principal will actually facilitate, and I wouldn't mind meeting with that person ahead of time to lay out how we're going to conduct it and tell them that their role will be very minimal, only if, you know, if a parent member, a community member, or a staff member is shy. And we usually have no problem with staff meetings, meeting with teachers, meeting with parents, but to your point, probably with community groups, we probably would need some presence just to welcome them in, signs to make sure the doors are open, et cetera, et cetera. Custodians might be able to do that. Do you mind if I work with Diane and talk with her about that?
Yeah, we can work out details on that.
Okay. So then, if we finish the virtual stuff right around Halloween and close the online survey around November 6th, when is your next public board meeting that we could present all of our findings to you?
That'd be what?
November 12th.
Would 12 November be too quick?
No, I think that'll work because, and I can be writing it, if we close on the Halloween, I'll write the stuff and they're just preparing the online survey report. That's pretty easy. So no, I think the 12th will work. So we'll go for November 12th. Again, to Ann's point, you probably need to create a superintendent search section on your website. And I can give you some suggestions for that, whoever I need to talk to about that. And you would put this date on there and say, you know, the results from your focus group stuff will be presented that evening and everything. And we'll have a very short PowerPoint, probably about 15 slides. We usually can run through it in about 20 minutes. You will have had it way ahead of time to read. Well, because of November 12th, maybe the beginning of the night, you'll get it. And then you can ask us questions. And, you know, Ann and I have been in many settings. Sometimes the presentation's 20 minutes and 2 questions, and sometimes it's 20-minute presentation and a lot of questions, but usually short. So I don't know if you want us at the beginning of the meeting, when you have the maximum crowd or people watching, or if you want to stick us in later, that's up to you, and we can work out that at a later time, but we'll shoot for November 12th. All right?
That'll work.
Okay. All right, so then, even though this next one starts with seminar on interviewing, question determination, and slate presented to the board, the most important phrase in there is slate presented to the board. This is when we're going to actually present you a slate of candidates. This is when you, on your portal, you'll be able to see everybody's application. You'll see who we're recommending in the top tier, who we're recommending in the middle tier, et cetera, et cetera. And then we will also start to talk about the interview. So what we usually do for the first interview, let's say you decide on 6 candidates that night to pursue. The first interview is a structured interview where every candidate gets asked the same question, and it'll probably be about 13 to 15 questions. We usually allocate about an hour and a half to the structured interview. The first question is a real softball question, like why do your skills and talents match Bedford County Public Schools? And the last question is, do you have any questions for us? In between, the whole gamut can get covered. You can write all the questions. I'll give you a bank of about 80 questions that seem to work in many different circumstances, and you can edit them, change them, make them Bedford specific. I'll try to make them Bedford specific. I'll try to include questions that we heard from the focus groups, but you guys are the ultimate determinant. So if Ann's the applicant, she'll take that softball question, and you'll go around the room, and each board member will ask the candidate a question. And if the candidate completely misses the question, we let you follow up. But it's not a night to pursue all kinds of little bunny trails or find other information out about the candidate. We want the answers to these questions, and we want to see how your answers compare to the other 5 applicants we're seeing tonight. At the end of those 6 interviews, we help you deliberate, and I'll say, vote 3 people off the island, vote 2 people off the island. Some boards say, can we only go with 2? And I would say, absolutely not, because one of the people might withdraw, and then you're left with 1. You shouldn't do that. So usually go into the final round with 3. So I think we're going to need, because these, you know, depending upon the candidate's ability to travel, where we are with vaccines, this could be happening in the first part of the year of next year. We'll plan on virtual right now, but you'll probably need at least 2 full sessions, 3 interviews. You could probably fit them all in one day. But again, boards tell us that's not good when we do more 3 and 4, they start to really complain. So you'll choose your 3 finalists, and I'll just go on before we set the dates. Some boards want community involvement, some don't. I can talk about the pros and cons of both ways. But the board interview with the finalists is completely unstructured. From the first interview, you should have developed, I like this about Ann Monday, I am concerned about this with Ann Monday. And so don't spend time on what you like about Ann Monday. Spend time talking, kibitzing with Ann Monday about what you had concerns about. And Mr. Leaney, you should make sure everybody gets equal representation. You might want to work with the board on what topics we're going to cover. They can be different depending upon the candidate. Some boards like to ask the same topics to each candidate, but it's very informal. And remember, I always tell boards, the candidate is interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. And your behavior and your participation are all indicators of, is this a good district to work in? I've had board members start tapping out on their cell phone. I've had board members get up and leave an interview. And let me tell you, candidates, it's not lost on the candidate that something's going on in the room. So just to give you a heads up there. And then, again, when we finish those 3, you might look at Brad Drager and say, I don't think we have a superintendent here. And if 4, 5, 6 of you agree to that, you might be absolutely right. We're going to go out, back out and look again. So there's no rush to the finish. I say never rush to the wrong candidate. So we will make sure that you feel comfortable on that final night. If you're going to pursue a candidate, we're pursuing that candidate because you really feel they're going to be the best superintendent for Bedford County. Then we start the background check. That takes about 10 business days. Sometimes I can get it back in 7. But they said because of the pandemic and the courtrooms being closed, you better plan on 10. The clerks and the courts and the records rooms are all backed up because they've been closed for so many months. Site visits down there, but they've kind of gone by the wayside because of all the social media and the announcement and appointment. So that's how the interview, slate presentation, interview process goes. Now, let's ask questions about, do you have questions about that before we start to set some dates?
Question? None.
Okay. I was going to propose, because we have the luxury of time here, I was going to propose that we actually come back the first of the year, probably like, let's see, January 1st is on the Friday. I would propose a slate presentation to you on the 4th of January. That gets us through the holidays. That meeting will take 2 hours, a minimum of 2 hours, because not only will you have read ahead on the candidates, but Ann and I'll probably go through each candidate we're highly recommending and make them come to life a little more. And you will have done some social media, and you may have a question about them. You may have a question about an applicant down in the pool that we didn't advance. And we might know that there was a DUI on that person just 2 months ago, and you probably don't want that person coming into Bedford on the superintendent's search. So it works both ways that evening, because this will be a closed session, and you'll decide on the interview. We'll also help you develop the questions that night and talk more about the structure of the interview. So is the 4th okay, or is there a board meeting you'd rather have us hang on to? We kind of like it separate from a board meeting because it's a pretty significant night, and we don't want you worried about the next crisis that's outside the door with the next agenda item, you know?
Is the 4th good for everyone?
What is the 4th?
So,
Monday.
The Monday night.
Yes.
Do you prefer this 5 o'clock time, or do you want later in the evening? It doesn't matter to us.
I can do 6.
My
6.
preference is 6.
6.
Let's go 6. Can I just ask on the November 12th, when do your board meetings start?
5.
Okay, so I'll just tentatively put that in for 5, in case you want to start with us. All right, so now I'm going to recommend if you do 5 or 6 or 7 candidates, we probably do this over 2 evenings. And you can come together like you are, or we could do individual Zoom tiles, and we'll structure the interview. And Ann or I will probably sit in. We like to, if you'll let us sit in, we like to listen to make sure the candidates are not telling you something different than they told us. Because that would be a huge discrepancy on our part, and I would be the first to inform you that's not the way they answered the question when we asked them that question. And we won't ask them the exact same sort of question, but we will have done enough research that we feel we know the candidate, and I want to see that the candidate is true to what we think we know. So what 2 evenings, and we could go as soon as, because it's possibly going to be virtual, I could literally have the candidates hanging for the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th. I mean, I could actually pull that off, that we could do that week. If you want to give another night, or if you want to go into the next week, that's okay too. Are there good nights or bad nights for the board?
What works for everybody?
Done with any night?
Yeah, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are usually not great for me, but I can make Tuesday work if I need to.
So Tuesday, Wednesday's not good.
Not good.
So Monday, Thursday would be best for everyone. One of those.
How about the 7th and the 11th?
Is that good?
And this is for the, excuse me, the slate
All right.
candidates to be presented?
This is continuing the slate?
No, this is the actual first set of interviews.
Yeah, it's an interview.
First set of interviews,
First
okay.
one.
Yeah, where it says initial interviews with the candidates, that's gonna be January 7th and the 11th. And if we start at 6 and we do an hour and a half, that's 7:30, 7:30, give 15 minutes. Yeah, you might wanna start at 5 on those evenings if you could. We won't make it too late. Are you okay with 5 on the 7th and the 11th?
Can we do that? Ms. Kirby?
I'll try to make it work. Worst case scenario, I'll be late.
Okay, or we maybe can adjust it. If you do go with fewer candidates, you can certainly adjust it that way too. Okay? So then on the night of the 11th, I will come on with all of you at the end of the last candidate there, and we'll try and decide who you want to see more of and who you want to not see again, because it just didn't turn down the Bedford Superintendent. So then we need to set the final round of interviews, and I'm going to recommend you strike while the iron is hot. And what I'd like to do is propose, if we do 3 candidates, that we do 3, I think you should devote an entire evening to each candidate. In the non-pandemic sense, we used to actually have the board eat a dinner. Well, actually, the candidate would take a tour of Bedford, then they would eat dinner with the board. This is all open because, there's no voting or anything taking like that. We usually have 2 board members take the candidate around. And then that evening is the open-ended interview after the meal. Now, if we get a beautiful non-pandemic world, we could go back to that model, but I just finished Atlanta, and they had to go virtual on their final interviews, and they said they worked great. So they did 1 candidate per evening. Of course, they didn't have dinner, they didn't do the tour, but they had 2.5, sometimes 1 candidate went 3 hours, but they only did 1 candidate per night. So I'm going to recommend we reserve at least 3 nights here for candidate interviews. And if you want to break them up, we could do, I think you said Mondays and Thursdays, we could do the 25th of January, the 28th of January, and the 1st of February, if you want to follow that Monday, Thursday, Monday time frame. Is that good for you guys?
Does that work for everybody?
Let me just check a minute.
Now that day we can start at 6 because the worst that happens is even with a 3-hour interview, you're going to go to 9. So we can start those at 6. So we're going to say January 25th, 28th, and January 31st. So then.
You said February
You
1st.
said February 1st. Hold on, February 1st.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm very, very old. No, not that old, just acting old. So then, on February 1st, I'll join you. Sometimes you're so exhausted, you say, schedule another meeting, which we can do. But sometimes that night, we can decide who we want, and we would start background check and the contract negotiations, and that usually takes a good 2 weeks to get that all done. So actually, we're talking, if everything went perfectly, we probably could have a superintendent named by March. at least a name out there. And if it's a current superintendent, sometimes they want to finish the year, or there's 60 more days. Sometimes they're in a contract where they have to give notice of 60 or 90 days. Most boards, even if that happens, it's in their contract, many boards will release them early just because that board wants to move on and find a new person too. So again, more bridges to cross when we get there. But we have I think we have a very good calendar to follow. It's a little aggressive here at the beginning to get the focus groups, but I think Ann and I are anxious to hear what Bedford wants. And then the announcement of the appointment, that's entirely up to you when you do it. Let me go back to the one thing that we didn't actually decide on, we didn't discuss. Best quality candidates will be a secretive, board-only process. Many communities feel indebted to the community participation part, and there's many forms it can take. Sometimes it's a very small group of people who get to meet with the finalists. Sometimes it's a much more public thing, almost a, for lack of a better word, a dog and pony show. If you start to go down that route, sitting superintendents will be very concerned about exposure and losing their current job, or at least the love of their community in their current job. Many superintendents will take the risk, especially if Ann and I recruit a great star for you, and they're in a high-performing district, that person probably the most wants this kept secret so that they or Bedford decide it's not the right thing to do, they can go back smoothly into their district and nobody knows the better. If we involve the community, we've had a few communities keep a secret real well with a small committee, but then there's the communities that want everybody in the world to know. Like in Florida, it's a sunshine law. As soon as a person applies, their resume is on the website. If you notice any Florida superintendent chosen in the last 5 to 10 years, they're all high school principals and assistant superintendents. They're people who, sitting superintendents don't risk their jobs to go to Florida. That's a board discussion, it's a board decision. Ann, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you explained it well.
You need an answer on that tonight, or?
No, it's just, if you were going to engage anyway with the community, we'd have to fit that calendar plan into it. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Where in the days, and my best recommendation, if you're gonna go with a small group, if you were ever to consider that, don't have them interview all 6, only have them just interview this, and we would put them usually on structured interviews, so they ask a set of questions, and they're not, I wouldn't ask them to rank the candidates. I would ask them for what they see as the strengths and concerns about each candidate, so that as the board goes into final interviews, you have that small committee's concept of how each person in there sees it. It shouldn't be a collective thing. It shouldn't be a group thing. It should be an individual thing that they each have an idea of what they see as a strength in the Ann Monday candidacy and what they see as a concern in the Ann Monday candidacy. But I can tell, and I would tell applicants there might be community involvement once I guess, Mr. Leamy, the sooner you know, because after they ask us what do they pay, the second question is this going to be confidential? That's always, and it might be sometimes the first question and sometimes it's the second question, but it's in the top 2 questions we get.
Okay, Mr. Hill had a question for you, then we'll come back to that.
Yeah, so when you were going through the final rounds, the 25th, 28th, and February 1st, you mentioned normally non-pandemic times that the candidates would come and tour the campuses and meet individually with the board and have dinner. Are you suggesting that wouldn't be the case for these 3 meetings? I'll publicly say I can't imagine making an offer to a superintendent and never have met him or her personally, not just through a Zoom or via virtual contact.
I think it's an excellent point. I think here on September 29th, we don't know where we will be in terms of comfortableness of travel, et cetera, and I think to your point, at the very least, there needs to be some level of probably travel, engagement, eye to eye, even if mask to mask. But I think we probably need to figure that out the further we get into this. By having those dates reserved, let's pretend there's a 3rd wave of COVID and everybody's locked down, it probably would be virtual and maybe still pending a live meeting later. Let's pretend everything's hunky-dory and the vaccine's rolling out and we all have 2 shots and everybody feels safe.
Yeah, I'm not interested in a vaccine, but I mean, I want to make very clear that I think it's very important for us to meet the candidates face to face. So I don't want to be lectured on a vaccine or whatever. I'm not interested in that. So I want to make very clear that I want to meet that person or persons
Understood.
if it's 3. So that's all I'll say.
Understood.
Thank you.
And if that is the will of the board, and I would have to tell the candidates that there's an expectation, and can I at least get clarification that at least maybe the first part's virtual and we figure out the second part live so that the candidate knows they can get to the first part virtually, but if they were to make the final, there is going to be some live meeting in Bedford. Is that all right?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mr. Hill on this one. You know, I'm more of a face-to-face kind of person than I am a electron type person. So I really think that that is very important for us to have the opportunity to actually lay eyes on a real human being as part of this process.
Understood.
Can I speak as well?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And I can assure you, because one of the things that we do in this is we develop relationships with these candidates as well, and we want this to be a good match for them. We want them to feel as comfortable with this decision in their lives as you do in yours. So everyone wants to have a face-to-face, and I cannot imagine, I mean, I think it would be very difficult for a candidate to imagine coming into a school district never having been there. So we will work toward that end for sure. That's everybody's preference. But you know, we are in difficult times, and none of us really know sitting here what it's going to be like in January. But that will be something that, as we're talking to candidates, we will say the expectation is that before an appointment's made, that the candidate travel to the district and that the board meets them. That's the expectation at that time. That's what our goal and our aim will be. Okay? And if something happens, we can all figure out something else, even if it means postponing some or considering some candidates in a different way. But let's go with that at this point.
And we have the beauty of time, if delaying the final in-person live interview another 2 or 3 weeks gets us someplace better, we have that luxury of time right now. So that, you know, it will work. And I'm glad you brought up the question. I'm glad we've committed to telling the candidates that we're expecting a live interview at the end. And I think you're all right in that. That's good.
Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson has a question.
Yes, basically it was kind of the same point that Ms. Monday made. I would think most candidates would want to see some of our facilities at least. So to as much of a degree as we could safely allow that, I think that would be good to consider for that final round interview as well.
And let me just provide clarification on that. Again, if we're in a highly confidential mode where the candidates are unknown to the general community, we actually don't go into the school, but the 2 board members, if we're conducting a tour in this live scenario that we're talking about, you give them the overview because they're going to be bringing their family, their spouse, whatever to Bedford. You show them the community, you show them the highlights of why you're proud of Bedford, but you also, of course, drive by all the schools. And by having board members in the car, they can ask you questions about that school that they're looking at, or you may want to highlight some certain programs or some certain issues that are at that school. It's a great informal way of, again, working the two-way street. If the candidate needs to fall in love with Bedford, want their spouse and family to live there, and at the same time, you're getting more comfortable that this is really a good finalist we should consider for superintendent. So that's how those tours usually work.
So, hey, Brad, Mr. Hill has another question for you.
Yeah, Brad, I want to be very clear. I think it's important that the candidates would be able to spend time with all of the board members, not just 2. Believe me, we are all very different and we represent very different areas. And so the candidates need to understand feedback from all of us, not just 2 board members.
I understood. In fact, let me go through that again. So just because of the open meeting stuff of Virginia, you can't have more than 2 board members supposedly because a decision could be made. And that's why they put 2 in the car. those two, sometimes in Virginia, 2 people do candidate A, 2 people do candidate B, 2 people do candidate C. But that night, let's pretend it's Monday the 25th, and Mr. Levy and Dr. Neely go on this tour with the candidate. That night, all 7 of you get to see that candidate for 3-4 hours. So you can interact however you want, and really, whatever happened in the car probably will only come into the final deliberations in terms of candidate quality and stuff like that. The other thing, I forgot to tell you this, once you finish the first round of interviews and you decide on 3 people, I then asked each of those 3 finalists to give me, in this case, I'd have to get 21 references, I'll figure out the math. But I would have each of you call 1 reference on each of the 3 candidates, so then when we do a final deliberation that last night, you've spent hours with the candidate, both in the structured interview, the informal interviews, some of you on the tour. If you can fit 7 in the car for the tour, so be it, go for it. And then you will also have talked to references, so when that candidate's being discussed that night, 7 of you each will give your reference and what you found out from your reference. So trust me, I want you, when you get to the final candidate, complete comfort, both in live meeting, background checking, social media checking, informal meeting. I want you very comfortable. I want wide, violent agreement that this is the best candidate. Other questions?
Questions?
Just to backtrack, when you said something about during the pandemic, now we don't have the ability to travel and for a prospective candidate to come here. I was thinking, didn't recruitment and retention do those come to Bedford videos? Could we send those to you? Would that be beneficial to you?
Yes, in fact, that would be great because we can actually put those into our portal so that the applicants can view those. That's a great idea.
Okay, thank you.
And, to your point, sometimes there's a realtor on the border or a realtor close and they put together a packet of realty in the area so they get some idea of housing and expenses and stuff like that. Chamber of Commerce can usually contribute some stuff. It becomes, again, it's partly selling and partly you're interviewing, so it's both on that day.
Brad,
Good point, thank you.
Whomever said that, I wish I could see your faces.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. One of the things that we know is that, especially for a superintendency, this is more than a job. This is a place to live. We hope that they bring their families with them and settle in your community. So that is probably the most important aspect of getting a superintendent that will not only come but will stay. And we are in the business of trying to find people who will stay. So we want people who want to be there, who want to live there and be part of that community. And the more that they know about it, the more comfortable they're going to feel.
Diana, could you send those links to them?
I'm sorry.
Could you send the links to the videos to them?
Yeah, I'll have to locate them probably from Leanne.
Okay.
Or
Yeah, I was wondering.
somebody, I can get them and
If you
send them.
would, please,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions for Brad or Ms. Wendy? All right, what else do we need to
Not walk out of the
determine?
parking lot. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
So what else do we need to determine tonight?
I think you covered it all in a little bit of time, but I don't want you walking out of the parking lot saying, I wish I'd asked them this, or asked them Monday that. So please, and you have to understand, I'm from New Jersey, so I talk way too fast. I really do, even though I've been in Virginia for a long, long time. I still, I did that stint of superintendent up there and I learned how to talk fast again. Feel free to just stop and say, I don't understand this one part of this, or I missed. You will get the dates. And please, if we've made errors, Ken and I will prepare our notes and send this back to you. But if we've made errors, please point them out, or if you still have another group to meet with, or there's some other question, we are committed to making sure we get this right.
Can I ask one more question? Back to the individuals, and I hate to keep adding to the time and everything that will take up.
Okay.
But you also said something about realtors. Would it be good to have a group of realtors on this board or the individuals to meet with the consultants and the leadership
Sure.
profile?
Sure. Then you might wanna, is there a Chamber of Commerce? You might wanna throw them into that meeting too. A business group?
Yeah, and we have a change of comment. I mean, I think we're kind of, to me, I think we can fit them in with other groups.
Okay.
Rather than expanding the number of
Yeah.
groups.
Exactly,
Invite them to attend as a member of one of our existing groups.
exactly.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that most candidates would be available to start work as early as March or April? Or would most of them be under contract and not be able to start until July 1?
Even if they're under contract, they can leave if they give 60 or 90-day notice. Most of the nation is 60 days. There's a few states they can do a 90-day notice. So if you were to name somebody February 1st, the board can't hold them beyond 90 days or 60 days based on the contract. Some superintendents, out of a personal sense of belonging, will say, I want to finish the school year. However, you have another whole set of people to consider. If you get a hotshot deputy superintendent, assistant superintendent, college professor, or whatever, this is a promotion, and they probably could start within 2 weeks. So, it all depends upon which candidate, what is their current contract lead, how happy is the board to either try and hold on to them or let them go. But you certainly, I don't see any issue with July 1st. I don't see any issue with the June 1st. I don't see any issue with the May 1st. Beyond that, it's a little bit of a push, but again, if you're hiring an assistant superintendent, and I have seen districts where the current superintendent, finishes out and the new person is named, and there's some nice meetings together or phone calls and stuff as they start the transition process. Too much transitioning is usually more detrimental than good, but some level of transitioning is very, very helpful. And you've had a long run with this current superintendent. And what am I forgetting? And you're my member.
No, I think that's a lot of information and a lot to digest, but as Brad said, we will send back to you these notes and they'll be in draft form. So if there's anything that we heard differently, and if you had some second thoughts, this is not etched in stone. This is a living document that can change. I want to come back to my first statement. Communicate with us, communicate with us, communicate with us. If you're upset or concerned, let us know. I will tell you, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to do some of these meetings virtually. And we will need some, we're going to have to think creatively how to respect everybody's health concerns and at the same time welcome involvement. But we will find a way to do that, even if it means making some individual phone calls to individuals that you say really are concerned and really want to give us input. We'll make this work. So just know that, and know that if you have concerns, please tell us, and we'll look for solutions. These are difficult times, but we're all in this together, and the applicants are in this as well. And they're having to make some difficult decisions about their own careers and their own lives in an extraordinary times. But they're good people out there. We'll find them for you, and I have every confidence that you'll be satisfied at the end.
Got several board members that have questions. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, thank you, sir. You mentioned too much or too little transition time could be detrimental. What would you say would be like the sweet spot for a transition period?
Well, Mr. Johnson, that's such a good question.
You're welcome.
And I'll tell you why. We all have different personalities. I took over a job once as an assistant superintendent from another assistant superintendent in Fairfax County. And he felt the proper transition time was 2 to 3 months. And I felt the proper transition time was 2 to 3 hours. So he took a couple days showing me all his files and where he had stored everything and telling me all his stories. And I was polite and listened, but I'll tell you, I never touched his files because they were important to him, but they didn't help us move forward. So I think the sweet spot might be around 2 to 4 weeks. I really do. In some school districts, the current superintendent goes into an advisory role, especially if you can bring the other superintendent on contract. You can't have two superintendents on contract, obviously, but you can, there's logistical stuff that can be done if that's important to you in terms of the transition. I'd say 2 months is way too long because hopefully we're gonna bring you bright superintendents who can quickly, they will have done a lot. I mean, part of your interview process is, how well does this person know who Bedford is? We want people who have done a lot of research on Bedford, understand Bedford. I love it. Some of my favorite candidate interviews is when the candidate finishes and the board says, I learned more about Bedford than I learned from being on the board. He goes, that person was really very well informed. So I'm giving you a very long answer to a question. More than 2 months is way too long. A week is too short. Probably 2 months. I mean, for one thing, there's only one office. So somebody's got to dance around that. But availability by phone, by personal messaging, by, just all the availability, that's what the transition is. Hey, tell me what you think about this. Who's this person? This group just contacted me. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What's in the budget for next year? What are the issues of the hotspot with the, board of supervisors or anything like that? Long answer, not a good one.
Okay, but it works, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I believe Ann answered my question, but I would just like to just confirm it again. So if we have any questions going forward or need further clarifications based on the information that you guys have shared with us tonight, we can call you anytime and ask these questions. Am I right on that?
Yes, very much.
All right.
As a courtesy of the other board, I don't know how you function as a board. Other boards have said, just make sure we're all CC'd or inform us, but, we're very informal too. I mean, if it was a critical issue that the entire board, if an individual board member asks me a question and I think the entire board, I'm gonna tell that board member, I think we gotta take this back to either Dr. Mealy or Mr. Leamy and have the entire board weigh in on this issue. But if it's just a question of information, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Dr. Hicks?
Do we as a board need to decide whether we really want someone to come on board in March and April, right in the middle of budget preparation? Or do we want someone to come on board the 1st of July where we won't have to buy out the current superintendent's contract?
I think a lot of that's gonna depend on what candidates are available to us. I mean, I don't think we can say at this particular point, it's gonna be March or it's gonna be 1 July until we have narrowed it down as far as what our candidates, availability of candidates.
But is that not something that we would need to decide before you present what the job opportunity is for possible applicants?
Yeah, to answer that question, what I would tell a candidate right now, if they say when do they want us to start, I'll say the current superintendent's under contract at June 30th, but the board is open to an earlier start date, but that's not a decision that's been made by the board. It'll be sometime in the spring.
Second.
Is that all right?
All right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. We should have done this at the beginning. Can we go from left to right and you just tell us who you are?
Your left or
and,
my left?
Your right, my left.
Okay.
I think that'll work. I think I start with Dr. Mealy. Am I right?
No, you're wrong, but we'll start with Dr. Mealy.
Just tell us why, if you have kids in the school and what you did, and just make yourself a little more interesting to us than what we've been seeing. I mean, you're very interesting, but I want to know a little personal part about it.
Okay, well, God bless you to think that I have any kids in school. So that I'm very happy that you even think I have kids old enough to be in school, because they're all grown and out of the house. I was an educator for 42 years. I taught grades K through 5, all of them. I was an assistant principal, a special education coordinator, a principal, and a director of elementary programs in Title I, and retired out of Bedford County, I guess a year and a half ago. I'm not exactly sure, because all my days now are, all my weeks just add up to 6 Saturdays and a Sunday, so.
Great. Great, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Jason Johnson, and I represent District 2, the south side of Bedford County. I don't have children yet, but I am a current practicing educator. I'm an academic advisor and a program director at Virginia Tech. And so through my role, I see the development that education is taking, the direction that it's moving in. And I was motivated and inspired to get involved because I don't want to see Bedford County's children fall behind their peers from other parts of the state, other parts of the nation and the world. And I'm proud of some of the work that we've done in Bedford County and look forward to seeing us continue to move forward.
Great, thanks.
I'm John Hicks, and I was an educator for 35 years, a teacher, assistant principal, transportation coordinator. The majority of that time was spent in Bedford County.
What did you teach?
That's me. Pardon me?
What did you teach?
I taught 7th grade science.
Wow, okay, great. Mr. Leamy?
Martin Leamy, my background's military. I currently work over at Virginia Military Institute, not necessarily on the education end of things, more on the disciplinarian end of things. So I guess there's some tenuous connection to education in my job. My son graduated last year. He is currently a freshman at Virginia Tech, which I was talking to Mr. Johnson earlier, has caused my wife a whole lot of angst as she did 2 years at University of Virginia before she transferred. So she's working through that.
Very good, thanks.
My name's Susan Kirby. I represent District 6 in Bedford, which is mostly the Liberty Zone and part of the Stanton River Zone. I am a paralegal by trade. Been in the field for 20-some years and with my current firm for 15 years next week. And I have an 8th grader and a 6th grader in the system.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Georgia Hairston, and I represent District 5, and I have a total of 37 years in education. 25 of those years were spent right here in Bedford County. And I have been a former special education teacher. I've also taught elementary and middle school. Both of my children are graduates of Liberty High School. And so that's a little bit about me. And I am a
Great,
GG.
thank you.
I am a GG.
Okay, you mean your nickname is Gigi, or?
I wear the title GG because I am just a wonderful grandmother to a beautiful little granddaughter.
Very good, thanks.
Marcus Hill, District 4, which is the forest area. I have 4 children, all who have been through or are currently in Bedford County schools. 2 are at Liberty University, and then I have 1 that is at CVCC through the early college program, and then I have a sophomore at Jefferson Forest. I'm a huge technology and networking proponent and want to make sure that we continue to push our students into the future. So that's Marcus Hill.
All right, great. Mr. Leamy, I have one more question, which is, we can only see this one side of the room. Are there 1,000 people on the other side?
1,742, I think. Is, no, actually, no. This is pretty much the contents of the room, with the exception of our techno whiz and news advance and reporter.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. You almost set a record. In fact, you may have set a record for most efficient planning meeting I've ever had. So that's very, very good. And I will call Diane in the morning and reach out to her either through email or phone call and get this thing rolling, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
Goodbye.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Did you get me that email?
I did, I'll have to mark it.